You won't believe what happened to me last week. I got a call from my HOA, the homeowners association that controls everything about our little cabin community, and they dropped a bombshell. They said I had just 1 hour notice to either sell my cabin or face some serious consequences. 1 hour, no warning, no heads up, just a cold, hard deadline. At first, I thought it was a mistake. There's no way they could expect me to make such a huge decision that fast. But no, they were dead serious. Suddenly, my peaceful getaway felt like a ticking time bomb. I've always loved that cabin. It's my escape from the daily grind, a place filled with memories, laughter, and quiet mornings watching the sunrise. But now, the HOA was threatening to take it all away. They claimed I violated some obscure rule, something about rental restrictions, and that was their final notice. It felt like I was being pushed into a corner, forced to give up everything I worked for. The tension was real, and I was left wondering, how could they do this with such little notice? What were my options? But here's where things get interesting. Instead of just giving in, I decided to fight back in a way they never expected. I found a loophole that let me triple their rent overnight. Yes, triple. It was a move that shook the whole HOA board and left them scrambling. But how did I pull it off? And what happened when they realized I wasn't going down without a fight? Trust me, the story only gets crazier from here. I'm about to share everything, the behind the scenes drama, the tension, and the unexpected twist that changed the game completely. Stick around, because you won't want to miss what comes next. To understand how things spiraled so fast, you need to know a bit more about this HOA and the rules they enforce. It's not just some friendly neighborhood group they've got. Strict policies that can feel more like a business trying to squeeze every last penny from homeowners. For years, they've been tightening the grip on cabins like mine, making it harder to rent out or even just enjoy your property the way you want. I always thought it was annoying, but manageable. Then this sudden ultimatum hit, and it became clear they were ready to push people out who didn't fit their plan. The rule they accused me of breaking was about short-term rentals. Apparently, they're cracking down hard on anyone renting their cabin for less than a month, trying to keep the community exclusive or something like that. It felt like they wanted to control everything: who visits, how often, and even the money that comes through. I'd rented my cabin a few times over the summer. Nothing wild, just enough to cover the bills. But according to them, that was enough to trigger their wrath. When I got the notice, it wasn't just a letter. It was a phone call filled with cold corporate language. No room for discussion or negotiation. 1 hour to either sell or face penalties that could ruin me financially. I remember sitting there, stunned, heart pounding. Could they really do that? Was this legal? What if I said no? That's when I started digging into the HOA's finances, their rental policies, and the fine print nobody really reads. Turns out, there was a way to fight back, a hidden clause buried deep in their own documents that allowed me to raise my rent fees dramatically under certain conditions. I wasn't just going to comply. I was going to flip the script, but this wasn't just about money. It became a battle over rights, respect, and standing up to a system that felt rigged. And believe me, the HOA wasn't ready for what came next. As I dug deeper into the HOA's rules and finances, I realized this wasn't just about my cabin. There were others in the community quietly struggling with the same harsh restrictions, feeling the pressure but too afraid to speak up. Some had already sold their properties under similar threats, while others tried to quietly comply, paying fines they couldn't afford just to keep their homes. The more I learned, the clearer it became that the HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were using them to control people, to squeeze money out of residents who didn't toe the line. One of the neighbors, an older couple who'd lived there for decades, confided in me that they were on the verge of losing their home because of a tiny paperwork mistake. They were heartbroken, and honestly, it made me angry. It wasn't just about policies anymore. It was about people's lives, their homes, their memories. This wasn't the peaceful cabin retreat I had signed up for. It was a battleground. Meanwhile, the HOA board was pushing harder. Rumors started swirling about them, planning to increase fees across the board, not just for rentals. People were talking about corporate interests behind the scenes. Big investors trying to take over and turn the whole community into a money-making machine. The tension was palpable. I felt the weight of everyone's hopes and frustrations. On my shoulders, could one person really take on the entire HOA system? On top of all this, my own life was spinning out of control. Friends who supported me worried I was getting in too deep, risking everything for a fight that might not end well. The threat of eviction, fines, and legal battles loomed large. But I couldn't back down now. The fight wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about standing up to unfair rules, about protecting our community's future. What I did next would either change everything or make me lose it all. Days turned into nights as I raced against the clock, trying to piece together every detail that could give me an edge. The HOA wasn't just going to back down quietly. They had lawyers, meetings behind closed doors, and a whole system designed to wear people like me down. I knew they were watching, probably waiting for me to slip up. Every call I made, every message I sent, felt like walking a tightrope. I started sending notices about the rent increase, something that left the board stunned. Overnight, what they thought was a quiet problem exploded into a full-blown confrontation. The emails from angry HOA members started flooding in, some siding with me, others worried about what this fight would mean for the whole community. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Neighbors who had been silent before were beginning to whisper, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment and hidden fees. It felt like a spark was igniting something bigger than just one cabin or one person. But with every step I took, the pushback got stronger. The HOA sent formal warnings, threatening penalties that could financially crush me. I knew this was more than a battle over rent. It was a war over power and control. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the pressure building in my personal life. Friends urged me to think carefully. Was this fight worth it? Could I afford to lose everything I'd worked for? The stress was real, but so was the fire inside me. I wasn't about to let an organization bully me out of my own home. Then came the day when everything changed. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss my rent increase and what they called breach of community guidelines. I knew this was the moment it all came to a head. The question was, would they back down, or was the fight about to get even more intense? I was standing on the edge, and what happened next would decide everything. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense, the unexpected hit like a thunderclap. The day of the emergency HOA meeting arrived, and I walked in ready for whatever they threw at me. But instead of the usual stern faces and rehearsed speeches, I was met with something entirely different, a surprise announcement that changed everything. The HOA president revealed they had been approached by a major developer interested in buying up several cabins, including mine, to build a luxury resort. Suddenly, this wasn't just about rental rules or fees anymore. It was about big money and a whole new vision that didn't include the people who'd lived there for years. This twist shook me to the core. The very organization supposed to protect our community was apparently making deals behind closed doors that could force us all out. It felt like a betrayal on a personal level. I realized the rent increase I triggered wasn't just a fight over fairness. It was a challenge to their entire plan, and they weren't going to take it lightly. On top of that, rumors spread fast that the HOA was preparing to use every tool at their disposal: legal action, fines, and even attempts to question my ownership status to silence me. The stakes had skyrocketed. It wasn't just my cabin on the line anymore. It was the future of the whole neighborhood and everyone who called it home. My phone started ringing nonstop with mixed messages, some neighbors ready to join the fight, others fearful of losing everything if the developer moved in. It was a dividing line nobody expected, and I was caught right in the middle. The tension exploded into heated conversations, secret meetings, and an uneasy feeling that the worst was yet to come. Now, more than ever, I knew standing up wasn't just about me. It was about protecting a community under threat, fighting back against forces far bigger than a simple homeowners association dispute. The battle was heating up, and what happened next would change everything, but the outcome was still far from certain. The day of the showdown finally came. The HOA board had gathered for their big vote on whether to enforce the sale of my cabin and move forward with the developer's plan. The air was thick with tension as neighbors packed the room, some silently rooting for me, others nervous about what the future held. I stood there, heart pounding, knowing everything I'd fought for was riding on this moment. I laid out everything, the unfairness of the short notice, the hidden agendas behind the HOA's strict rules, and how the rent increase was my way of pushing back against an organization that seemed more interested in profit than community. My voice didn't shake, even though inside I was a mess. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the board members, a longtime resident who had stayed quiet until now, stood up and spoke out against the developer's plan. She revealed documents showing the HOA president had personal financial ties to the developer, a clear conflict of interest that called the whole sale into question. The room erupted. What started as a fight about rent and rules became a battle over integrity and trust. With the evidence on the table, the vote was postponed and an independent review was ordered. It was a small victory, but a huge step forward. The community had rallied, and for the first time, the HOA was on the defensive. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, there was one more surprise. The HOA's lawyer approached me quietly after the meeting and handed me a letter. It was an official offer not to force me to sell, but to negotiate a new rental agreement that was fair and transparent. They wanted to avoid more backlash and legal trouble. I left the meeting feeling exhausted but hopeful. The fight wasn't over, but the balance of power had shifted. And as I looked around at my neighbors, I realized something important. Standing up wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about protecting our home, our community, and making sure no one else would get blindsided the way I did. But deep down, I wondered, was this really the end, or just the beginning of a whole new battle? After that intense meeting, things started to slowly shift in the community. The independent review uncovered more about the HOA president's ties to the developer, and the board was forced to take a hard look at their own rules and how they affected longtime residents like me and my neighbors. We began working together, pushing for changes that made the rental policies clearer and fairer, with limits that actually made sense for people who just wanted to enjoy their cabins without fear. The rent increase I'd triggered became a turning point, sparking conversations about transparency and fairness in the HOA's decisions. People who had felt powerless before started speaking up, organizing meetings, and making sure their voices were heard. It was inspiring to see a community come together not just to protect property, but to protect the sense of home we all shared. Of course, the fight wasn't easy. There were setbacks and moments when I wondered if it was all worth it. But every step forward reminded me that standing up to unfair treatment mattered, not just for me, but for everyone living in the neighborhood. I learned that sometimes you have to take risks and push back, even when the odds feel stacked against you. In the end, I kept my cabin, and the HOA agreed to a rental agreement that was fair and transparent. More importantly, the community became stronger and more united. The developer's plan was put on hold, and for now, the cabins remain a place where memories are made, not just investments. If there's one thing I want you to take away from My story? It's this. Never underestimate the power of standing up for what's right. When a community comes together, even the toughest battles can be won. And sometimes, a surprise rent increase can be just the spark needed to ignite real change.